I bet most of us have been on a road trip or a long car ride somewhere. Well, the cool thing about a road trip is that when you're in the car for a long time, your parents often throw some rules out the window. They let you play on your device for as long as you want, and they let you have whatever snacks you want. Good food, good friends, good times. Road trips are one of my favorite things. Listen to Jamie tell you about one of his favorite road trip memories.
One thing you may not know about me is that I love barbecue. And in fact, I love it so much that one time in college, my friends and I decided to take a road trip to find as many of the great barbecue places as we possibly could and eat at them. And so we left Nashville, Tennessee, got in a car, all four of us, and drove down to Texas. It took like 20-something hours to get down there in total driving, and we hit like 6 awesome barbecue restaurants along the way. It was incredible. Car smelled terrible, but it was incredible. Like, I love road trips. And the reason I told you that story is because we're starting a new series called Road Trip, in which we're gonna take a look at some of the road trips that Paul went on. In case you don't know, Paul was a follower of Jesus who wrote most of the New Testament. And he played a huge role in the spread of Christianity by going town to town telling people about Jesus.
And come to think of it, life is sort of like a road trip, right? As middle schoolers, you're on your way somewhere. You're on a road right now. And let me tell you a secret. You're on your way to becoming a grown-up. I know, right? Well, no one stays in middle school forever. Things are different for you now than even 6 months ago. I bet some of you grew an inch taller these past 6 months. Some of you got braces this year. Some of you changed schools and had to find a new group of friends, all on your own.
And as you grow up and get older, your thoughts about God might be changing too. Maybe some of you have believed in Jesus since you were young and have always been sure that Jesus is exactly who he says he is. Maybe you're sold out for Jesus and you love church.
But there may be some of you who are finding that as you grow older, your thoughts about God are changing. You think about God when you're at church, but only because that's what you're expected to do. But then comes school or daily life, and you start to notice that no one outside of church seems to care much about this whole Jesus thing.
So it starts to get pretty easy to just not really care about it either. It's not that you don't want to think about God, you just have a lot of other things on your brain right now, like pre-algebra, your locker combination, and that cute girl at your lunch table. Well, those are important things too. But when you slow down and stop to think about it, maybe you wonder if this whole following Jesus thing even matters. And maybe you aren't convinced it does.
That's why we're talking about Paul's journey, because he had some moments when his faith in God was really tested. You need to know that Paul wasn't always committed to Christianity. At one point in time, Paul had absolute certainty that Jesus was not the Son of God. Paul was actually opposed to this whole Christianity thing to the point where he physically persecuted those who followed Jesus. But something happened to Paul on a road trip that changed him forever. On this particular road trip, Paul was headed to Damascus to defend his Jewish faith and throw more Christians in jail. In his mind, Christianity had to be stopped.
Knowing that, let's look at what happened to Paul on the road. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul was another name that Paul went by, but that's another story for another day. "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything.
Paul had a face-to-face encounter with the risen Jesus while he was on his road trip. Now, I don't know if Paul immediately changed his mind about Jesus right there on the road. I bet he was a little shell-shocked. I also bet that those 3 days of being blind and not eating or drinking gave him the space to process what had happened. I bet sometime during those 3 days, Paul changed his mind about Jesus. What a wild experience, right? This road trip was the turning point in Paul's faith journey. He went from a persecutor of Christians to a promoter of Christ.
What made Paul change his mind about almost everything he believed? What made him stop destroying churches and start planting them instead? Well, the answer is the most common churchy answer of all time. It's Jesus. See, Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and it changed his understanding of who God is.
So whether you're convinced about who Jesus is, or uncertain, or if honestly you just don't care, I want to invite all of you to consider what Paul wrote in one of his letters to the Christians in a town called Philippi. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and act in order to fulfill his good purpose.
Paul knew that our faith is a journey, just like a road trip. There will be times when we strongly believe and times when we're unsure. There may even be times when we just don't care about our faith. Well, that's why Paul encouraged us to work out our salvation, to keep walking, to keep engaging, to keep pursuing.
Here's what we mean when we say to work out your salvation. Simply think about it. What are your thoughts about Jesus? Like Paul, maybe you aren't seeing something clearly. Maybe you have some wrong views of Jesus just like Paul did. So be open to the possibility that perhaps there's something more to discover about who God is and what that means for your life right now.
And as you think about it, give yourself time and space to listen. Paul needed to take a 3-day time out on his road trip to rest, recover, and get his sight back. And that allowed him some time to process his experience with Jesus before his life took on an entirely new direction. So where can you find space and time in your life between swim practice and friends and homework just to think about your own walk with Jesus? Maybe at night before you go to bed, you can take a few minutes to just write down your thoughts about Jesus and listen to what God might be saying to you through sermons or music or scripture and other Christians in your life.
Remember, God isn't asking for your certainty about everything there is to know about the mysteries of the universe. He's asking for your consideration and trust. And like Paul, be open to changing your mind. Jesus probably won't show up in your life quite as weirdly and dramatically as he did with Paul, but I do know that the road with Jesus changes your mind about God.
Take some time and space this week to invite Jesus on this faith journey with you. When you're willing to change your mind about God, don't be surprised when he starts showing up and surprising you with who he really is and what he's up to in your life.